The night the Rolls-Royce appeared, Marcus Williams was already tired in a way sleep could not fix. He stood at the entrance of the Grand Harbor Hotel, straightening his jacket for the 100th time, watching rain bead and slide down the polished glass doors. The city lights blurred into trembling streaks, and for a moment he wondered how many nights of his life had dissolved just like this, quiet, unnoticed, faithful. Then the engine purred. Low, confident, impossible to ignore. When Marcus looked up and saw the silver Rolls-Royce glide to a stop in front of the hotel, something inside him tightened, as if the past had finally decided to come back and speak. 22 years earlier, Marcus had been a young waiter with a hopeful smile and a worn pair of shoes. He worked at a small family diner called Grace Table, a place that smelled of coffee, fried eggs, and forgiveness. Marcus believed deeply in kindness, not the loud kind that demands applause, but the quiet kind that feeds people when no one is watching. He had grown up in church basements and borrowed pews, raised by a mother named Ruth who taught him that faith was proven in action, not words. "If God puts someone in front of you," she used to say, "He's trusting you with them." One winter evening, as snow tapped softly against the diner windows, Marcus noticed two children standing outside. They were thin, their coats too big, their shoes cracked and tired. A boy, maybe 10, held the hand of a little girl who could not have been more than 8. They didn't come in. They just stood there, staring at the menu taped to the glass, their breath fogging the window. Marcus watched them for a long moment, his heart nudging him forward. When he finally stepped outside, the cold bit into his face. "Hey there," he said gently, "you hungry?" The boy stiffened, protective, but the girl nodded before he could stop her. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Marcus led them inside and sat them at a corner booth. He brought hot chocolate first, then plates piled high with food, chicken, potatoes, bread, and slices of apple pie that were technically for paying customers. When the owner, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, noticed, she raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She trusted Marcus. The boy introduced himself as Daniel and the girl as Sarah. Their parents were gone, an accident months earlier, and they had been moving between shelters, sometimes sleeping in abandoned places when space ran out. They ate slowly at first, as if afraid the food might disappear. Marcus pretended to wipe nearby tables so they wouldn't feel watched. When they finished, Sarah smiled at him, her face glowing with warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. Daniel tried to leave a few crumpled coins on the table. Marcus gently pushed them back. "Just promise me something," Marcus said. "When you're able, you help someone else." Daniel nodded solemnly, like a vow had been carved into him. Those children came back a few more times over the following weeks. Sometimes Marcus fed them. Sometimes Mrs. Thompson slipped them food when Marcus was busy. Then one day they didn't return. Marcus asked around, worried, but no one knew where they'd gone. Life, as it always does, moved forward. Marcus kept working. He married a kind woman named Grace. They had a son, then a daughter. Money was always tight. Dreams were adjusted, not abandoned, but tucked into quiet corners. There were hard years. Grace fell ill and passed away far too young, leaving Marcus to raise their children alone. He worked double shifts, missed school events, and prayed through exhaustion. There were nights he sat on the edge of his bed, asking God if kindness truly mattered in a world that seemed to reward cruelty. Yet every morning he put on his jacket and returned to service, not because it paid well, but because it felt right. By the time Marcus found work at the Grand Harbor Hotel, his hair was threaded with gray. His children were grown. His life had become small and steady. Guests passed through without knowing his name. Tips were polite, not generous. Still, Marcus greeted everyone with the same warmth, believing that dignity was something you carried, not something others gave you. And then came the Rolls-Royce. The driver stepped out first, opening the rear door. A tall man in an immaculate coat emerged, his posture confident, his eyes scanning the hotel entrance until they locked onto Marcus. For a moment, neither moved. The man's expression softened and he smiled, a smile Marcus recognized instantly, though decades had passed. "Mr. Williams," the man said, walking forward, "I was hoping it was you." Marcus felt his breath catch. "Daniel?" he asked, barely believing the name as it left his lips. Daniel nodded, emotion thickening his voice. And Sarah is inside. She wanted this to be a surprise. Before Marcus could respond, a woman stepped out of the car. She was elegant, composed, and smiling through tears. "You fed us," Sarah said simply, "when no one else did." They sat together in the hotel lounge, drawing curious glances. Daniel told Marcus everything. How a church had taken them in not long after those diner nights. How Sarah had gone on to study medicine. How Daniel, driven by a need to build something lasting, had started a business that grew beyond anything he imagined. But none of it, Daniel said, would have mattered if we hadn't learned early on that we were worth something. Marcus listened, tears tracing lines down his weathered face. He tried to wave it off. "I just gave you dinner," he said. Daniel shook his head. "You gave us dignity, you gave us a future." They handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was a letter and keys to a house near his grandchildren, fully paid. There was also a scholarship fund in his name for children who fell through the cracks. Marcus covered his mouth, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry without restraint. That night after the Rolls-Royce disappeared back into the city, Marcus stood alone again at the hotel entrance. But the world felt different now. Not because he had been rewarded, but because his faith had been answered. Kindness, he realized, does not vanish into the void. It travels, it grows, it returns, sometimes in ways you never expect. And as Marcus whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, he knew the truth his mother had taught him long ago still held. When you feed the hungry and love without condition, you are never truly unnoticed.